Good.
Enough questions.
Great. Hello, Konstantin and VJ. We're gonna give it another at least 7 minutes for people to join. So if you still want to kind of make yourself a cup of tea or get yourself comfortable, you still have time.
And if you want to change your name to say where you come from, that's not only very interesting, but it might show up if anybody else comes from your area. And do you know how to do that? You hover your mouse over your picture, and then at the top right-hand corner, there's 3 little dots. And if you click the dots, it'll give you a chance to say your name and where you're from, should you wish to do that. Hi, Jerry.
Hello.
Jerry, if you want to change your name to show where you're from, put your mouse over your face and there's 3 little dots at the top right-hand corner. And then you can click the dots and add your location. Which... Danke.
Hey, Joe. Back again in a different room, in a different space. Me, Joe, and the other Joe were just in another meeting together.
Actually, we are lost in internet space.
Cyber surfing.
You're on private channel across the ether.
Fantastic. So I just said to the others, we give it another 5 minutes before we start.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome. A few more people joined. So we now have the chance, if you would like to share your contact details, as we're now building our People's Assembly Facilitation group. If you feel like you want to exchange of where you are, maybe you want to put in the chat your name, your local, what's your local group, where's your location, so we can get an overview of where people are actually joining us into this training. And also, if you feel you want to exchange your contact details, you might want to include your email address as well. But this is just purely for you as a kind of People's Assembly facilitation group now. And we give it another 2 minutes before we start.
And I always like it when I can see where people are from because it's curious. So if you want to change your name, you can put your mouse over the 3 little dots over in your image, and then you can add your location if you wish to. It's also useful to connect with people who come from the same area.
It's 5 past, so I would say we can get started. Maybe, Joey, if we can leave the meeting open for another 5 minutes before we close the meeting, so in case some people are kind of joining us a little bit later, there's still a bit of space. So great, so welcome everyone to the People's Assembly facilitation training. And it's, it's great to see your face on school. So just so you know, this training will be over 3 hours, and we will give you quite a lot of information on People's Assemblies, and then you also have a chance to practice People's Assembly. So just before we start with the training, just a few practical things. So it's really helpful if you mute yourself when you don't speak. It just means like we're minimizing the background noise, and it's less destructive. So it's really good to keep yourself on mute if you don't speak anything. You will, in order to really fully participate in this training, you will need to have at least a working microphone, and if possible also a working camera, because we will put you in pairs to do some exercises. And just checking, we have one person who's called user. So I'm just wondering if you have, if you can put your name on it, just to make it a little bit more transparent. And Marina and Hester, just wondering if you have a working video. Obviously, if your internet connection is not very stable, it might help that you switch off the video once in a while if you want to speak. Just checking if we have a working microphone for Maria and Hester and a person called user. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Good. So just in the meeting, also just to help us get through the content fairly well. So we're going to deliver a piece of content, and then there will be parts where we can have space to take in questions and respond to questions. It's useful if you can keep the questions to these sections, or you can type them into the chat just to help us to run the training more smoothly. Okay, so let's just take a moment to learn together in this virtual space as a community. So if the people who have switched off their cameras, if you can switch it on for a moment so we can just kind of share the faces, we can see each other, who we are on this training with. Great. Welcome. Welcome in this space. Nice to see faces. Great. And so find a place to get yourself a bit more comfortable. I'm just going to make it a little kind of grounding exercise to help us land in this virtual space, as most of us are probably in lockdown, and we are probably fairly used to different Zoom meetings, but just to help us to land physically in the space in which we're in, and just land also with the content of the call in a moment. So maybe if you're in a room, it might help if you need to close the door, just to bring the focus to the here and now. And if it feels right for you, you might want to lower your gaze or close your eyes and just check in of how you're doing at the moment. And if it feels right for you, maybe take 3 kind of deep belly breaths to land. Breathing in and breathing out. And again, breathing in and breathing out. And one more breath in and breathing out. And bring your attentions to your weight in the chair, the sensations of your feet touching the ground, or the cushion you sit on. You might notice some sensations in your body, your clothing on your skin. You might hear some sounds in the background, maybe some traffic in the distance, or some bird songs, or some sounds in the house in which you're in. Just let them be in the background. And connect to that reason that brought you on this call. What made you come to this Peeps Assembly facilitation training? And beyond that initial reason, maybe there's a deeper motivation, a deeper curiosity, or a deeper yearning. Just be with this intention, with motivation. And in a moment, I will light children's fire, and this flame represents all life on Earth, and then next 7 generations. It serves to remind us that every decision we make is not just ours to carry, but will be felt for 7 generations to come. It can remind us that we are doing this for all interconnected life on Earth. I will light a candle for us to hold this intention during this training. And slowly take a few deeper breaths, and maybe if you have your eyes closed, blink your eyes open again. And I will place this candle, quite a small flame at the moment, and we'll place this candle just here next to me to hold this intention for us. Great. So again, welcome to the People's Assembly Facilitation training. I'm Petra. I'm one of the co-facilitators. I've been part of the People's Assembly Facilitation team since the beginning of the year. Been holding various People's Assemblies and facilitating, and I'm teaching at uni, so I have facilitation experience in different areas. Yeah. And just to say also, we are a new team, which I'm really delighted to deliver this training with. And passing it over to Vicky.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've run quite a few assemblies, but I'm very bad at teaching. I haven't had much experience of it. So thank you for giving me a chance to improve. We're all on a learning journey together. And I'll pass over to Tim.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Tim. I'm from Godalming. I've been involved in XR since, I guess, October 2018, mostly as a protester, but since I became involved, I've been really impressed with a lot of the progressive and democratic approaches that the community brings. And I've run quite a few people's assemblies. I've really enjoyed learning more about them, and I think they're a really good way to involve people in decision making, and those decisions seem to come out better. So I'm looking forward to trying to help more people use them and be involved with them. Thanks. So I'll pass to Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm a member of a working group in the UK called People's Assemblies Working Group. What I'm doing today is just maybe some of the technical Zoom stuff, so I'll put you into some breakout rooms and stuff, and then when it all goes wrong technically, that will be my fault. And I'll pass you over to Petra.
Alright, thank you. So glad you're on this to support us technically, Joe. Tim is going to give us an outline of the core of the training.
Sure. So today we have this introduction, which I hope you're all enjoying. Then we've got the introduction to people's assemblies. I'm going to talk to you about the hand signals that we use. Then there's going to be a participant introduction section where we're going to do our first breakout groups and an opportunity to meet each other and talk a bit about what we want to get out of today. Then we're going to talk about the three pillars of people's assemblies: radical inclusivity, active listening, and trusting the process. Then we've got, following on from that, an active listening exercise. Then we're going to go into quite a few more details about the People's Assembly, the stages, the timings and roles in those. Then we've got a comfort break, followed by talking about dealing with difficult interactions, including an opportunity for you guys to share any that you've experienced. And then we'll be doing the all-important practice. We're going to go into breakout groups to actually practice facilitating, note-taking, and being involved in people's assemblies. Followed by, depending on time, another short comfort break, and then a review of the session based on the goals we set out at the beginning, and a talk about what's next before we check out.
Thank you. So, technical point, Patrick, somebody was trying to get in. Did you notice in the chat?
No, I didn't.
So I'll talk meanwhile a little bit about people's assemblies in general. To me, they're an extremely important form of democracy, which we desperately need, because they are a way of discussing and coming to decisions and sharing opinions, which is inclusive, and nobody dominates, no sector dominates. They encourage the quietest people to be heard and to be listened to, which is important. There's a range of these deliberative democracy tools. People's Assembly is one, and at the top end there's a Citizens' Assembly, and there's various other ones along the way, like Citizens' Jury, Community Assembly, and so on. The Citizens' Assembly is normally commissioned by a government who wants to ask the citizens' assembly, which is actually like a jury, to help them make government type decisions. So it has a real purpose. It's not just a consultation, and the people in it are demographically representative. So depending on the decision, they will represent all walks of life for the relevance of that decision. So, for example, a seaside area which is dealing with risk of losing their town to rising sea levels, the people who attend it would normally include homeowners and fishermen. If you're talking about abortion in Ireland, that would normally include people of more religious faiths, levels of faith. And when we had them in England, in different counties, it would include, on climate change, it would include climate deniers as well as people who want action on that. And the people are chosen through random sortition. They're chosen randomly, but they represent all walks of life. So that would include the rich, the poor, the educated, different races, different genders, and so on. People's Assembly is different to that because we've chosen to be here. We're not representative of the whole of society. Our decisions vary. In this occasion, the decisions of this assembly will go nowhere, so we need to know that. So it's important that people know at the beginning what will happen to the results of that assembly. And they can be used in different ways by Extinction Rebellion. They can be used to share views and to inform strategy. They can be used to lead straight into actions, or they can be used as an action. I was in Copenhagen at the climate summit of the Conference of the Parties of World Governments, and we occupied a square, and the police said, will you leave in 10 minutes? And we said, oh, we'll let you know in a minute. We'll just have a little discussion. And they watched us sit down, and we discussed with a full People's Assembly, and they walked up and down shaking their heads, and they're actually quite impressed. So a long time after 10 minutes, we told them that some would leave in an hour and the rest would stay, and that's what happened. So in that occasion, the People's Assembly was an action. It was an action of occupying the square. They can be used in a variety of ways. Sometimes they lead straight into a lot of actions. But I was wondering how much experience you all had of People's Assemblies, and in order to answer that, we'll do a thing called a temperature check, which is normally used to gauge people's opinion. High, agree strongly; low, sort of don't agree very strongly; middling, somewhere in the middle. And so I was wondering if you could show whether you've led a large People's Assembly, that's a high level of experience, had no experience at all, in which case you don't show your hands, have maybe led or taken notes at a smaller People's Assembly in the middle, or just taken part in them, and that would be low. I hope you can see your hands. So do you want to show your hands as to where you're up to on that sort of... Right, so quite a mixture. Thank you very much. So I'll pass on to Joe. I think that's how we come up to that point, to talk about more hand signals. Sorry to Tim.
Hey, yeah, cool. So that's quite all right. Okay, so I'm going to run through the hand signals. I think a lot of them, even if you aren't that familiar with People's Assemblies, you will have come across. We've just done temperature check, so I won't go over that again. The making a point. So please join in to just show that we're being heard. So make a point. This is when we want to to make a point within the discussion that's being the People's Assembly discussion that's being facilitated. The facilitator will try to stack the people that have raised a finger to make a point, assuming there's more than one. They may not do it in order. Never be offended if they don't. It'll be depending on whether they're trying to get more people in the discussion. Some of the others are sort of commonly known, but sometimes not used in quite the right way. So a direct point, 2 fingers, index finger on each hand. So this is really to make a very brief additional point to what someone's already saying, and we shouldn't use this to try and jump the queue. It's really to just where we need to feel that something really pressing to add to what the person is saying. That should be a very short point. Agreements. This is probably one we all know and love. So wavy hands, and that's
Привет.
just a really good way of saying you agree.
Привет.
Привет.
For
Привет.
the person listening, it's also
Мы оба почти в темноте.
it's very visual. We're all too familiar with nodding
У тебя
our
светло.
approval, which has
Ну да,
many
да.
different,
Ну,
can have
не очень
different
тоже.
cultural implications.
На меня немножечко лампочка светит. Сейчас молния была такая очень яркая. Тут прям сильный дождик.
А у нас был прям ливень такой.
Вот, наверное, и сюда дошел. Ты его отправил, наверное, к нам. Отправлял ливень сюда?
Нет.
Нет? Нет? Значит, он сам пришел. Звук выключен у тебя. Вот, ты разбираешься с кнопками. Глаз почти не видно. Вот, у тебя и видео выключено, и звук выключен. Как же с тобой общаться? Никиткин, не вижу тебя, не слышу. Я думал, ты, может быть, днем получится позвонить тебе, хотел показать твой дуб.
Какой?
Мы, да, в честь тебя когда-то с Егором посадили дуб. Он уже такой подрос, приличный. И сейчас на нем почки начинают набухать. Такой уже.
На дереве или на Егоре?
Что?
Так, почки на дереве или на Егоре?
На Егоре не знаю, а на дереве точно. На Егоре, наверное, тоже. Весной на всех почки появляются. И на людях, и на деревьях.
Даже на лягушках?
Даже на лягушках. Я, да, сегодня наблюдал такую картину. Такая большая лягушка, толстая. Ползет.
Так это не лягушка, это жаба.
Наверное. А на ней другая сидит. Примерно такого же размера. Они весной друг на друге ездят.
А зачем они ездят?
А я вот даже не знаю, что это такое происходит. Это, наверное, может быть супружеские пары, я не знаю, мужчина-лягушка и женщина-лягушка, не знаю.
А я думала, они в игру играют такую, там руками через человека перепрыгивают, лягушки.
Точно. Ты хочешь сказать, одна прыгала и не допрыгнула, села на загривок?
Да.
А у этой игры какое-то название есть? Да, как она называется-то? Эта игра.
Да.
Как-то. Слушай, мы же играли в такую игру. Опять тебя не вижу и не слышу. Вот, теперь вижу.
А так видишь?
Так вижу темноту. Мы, кстати, в прошлый раз задумывались, можно ли видеть темноту. Но, вернее, не так.
Сейчас посмотрим. Можно ли видеть темноту? Вот сейчас.
Ну вот, я вижу темноту в телефоне. Вокруг есть свет.
Я своими глазами вижу по-другому.
А как ты создал темноту в телефоне?
Не знаю как.
Ты закрыл камеру просто пальцем или как?
Нет.
А как?
Показал тебе. Вот. Могу еще раз. Видишь?
Ну, вижу темноту. Ничего больше.
Я пальцем ничего не закрываю.
Да. Что ты?
Выиграл в гляделку.
Так. А давай я тебе покажу. У меня коротенький разговор будет. У меня видеозвонок идет одновременно. Тебе покажу, что тут происходит. Hi, James.
Hello, Constantine. How are you?
Good. There are two of us. Yeah.
Three of us, I hope. Where's
Three.
Lewis gone? He's there somewhere.
Okay.
Well, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Or you can go first.
I'm not that experienced. So have you got more experience at this?
Oh, okay. I can do it. Yeah. I've been to a few. I've been to a few people assembly and facilitated a few.
Oh wow.
And they're different sizes, but still. And I've done actually 2 trainings on facilitating people's assembly.
Oh wow. Okay.
Here in Russia. And we're planning the next one for the weekend, so it's kind of, for me, an opportunity, this training, to maybe get fresh ideas, maybe different insights, because different people do it differently. Yeah, the basics are the same, but still, sometimes, it's all the time you can learn something new.
Sure.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm James. I'm in England. I'm in Manchester at the moment. I actually used to live in Moscow. Actually, I used to come to Moscow a long time ago. But yes, I'm here. I got involved with it because I moved up from London last year. I've been down in London a long time. I got involved with XR in London and then came up here last year. We had a very successful thing called the Northern Rebellion here last year, which is very good. And so I was helping do legal support with that. And so, I mean, my interest in people's assemblies is kind of twofold. I'm interested from what you might say a political point of view in terms of how they organise people. I'm also quite interested from a legal perspective in the whole constitutional aspect of it,
Okay.
the machinery underneath it. So I find it interesting on both sides. I've only been to one. I've only been a participant in one. Okay. So, but I've been, chaired boards and stuff, and I'm used to chairing things, so I'm not frightened of that. It's mainly learning how to do it and understanding, and also getting under the skin of the ethos of it. I think.
Okay.
I think that's always very important, because it's. I mean, I've read up on it and all the rest of it. Been in one, and there is a certain one might say that, like, the medium is the message. You know what I mean? The way people organise, the way a particular structure is organised, it doesn't predetermine what happens within it, but it's very important. The organisation of the structure is very important in terms of the kind of basically the answers that you get are going to be determined by the questions that you ask and also the structure within which it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Agree?
Cool. So it's just you and me now. Lewis has run off.
Say again?
When we first started, there were 3, and now we've what's it say? Oh, cool. Anyway, but it's good to meet you anyway. It's like, are we disappearing now, or what happens now?
We can leave, break out, I guess, and go back.
Oh, well, cool. I mean, how was you've done them. You tell me your experience. How was it?
See you.
Okay, take care, Constantine. All the best. What do we do?
Okay, we have Constantine Maria coming back. Is it a technical thing or?
I can put you, Constantine, to go into that. Oh, hi, Konstantin.
Hi.
Oh, hi. You'll probably have a join link there, and that will take you to one of the breakout rooms.
Oh, fine. I finished. So.
Oh, you finished. Okay.
Yeah, we're done.
We did, Konstantin, if you stay in your group of 3, and you just kind of, each person gets a chance to share something. So if
We've done that.
you've done that already, okay, because we give you 3 minutes each, so then you can hang in there until everyone else is coming back.
Okay.
Oh, something happened. Pete?
Hi, yeah, my computer just froze when we went over to breakout rooms. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, and it took about 3 minutes to restart, so I missed the whole of that.
All right.
Who were you with? Do you know who you were with?
I have no idea. I've lost picture again. Where are you? Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know, because it just it went onto a freeze out screen, and I had to wait for my computer to restart.
Never mind. Pete, can I ask where you're from, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I'm in Lancaster, North
Lancaster.
England.
Great.
How are you doing for timers?
So I have 10 more seconds for round number 2, and then we have 3 more minutes for round number 3. So you can post, you can send the message now. Yeah. Great. Pete, we just said to Konstantin and Maria that in 3 minutes everyone comes back, so just hang in there. Just 3 minutes to wait. Nice. I like thumbs up. And Maria, just to know whether you'd be able to do the People's Assembly practice later on. Do you have a working microphone? Just to know.
Hi. Hello.
Hey, Maria.
Great.
Hi. Sorry. So doing this, I've been trying to join this for a few times. I'm not very well, unfortunately, so I don't know if I will last the whole thing. I've got a really bad headache, so I'm kind of listening in for a little bit. But I might actually need to leave and join you next time.
Absolutely. See how you feel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
It's great
very welcome. Sorry?
It's great to see so many people from all over. Like, it's really international, isn't it? So many.
Yeah, good. Great. Yeah, just see how you feel. We're going to go through the content, and after that, there's a chance to actually practice the People's Assembly. So if you have the energy, you're more than welcome to join in. And if you feel like you need to leave the call, that's also fine. See how you feel.
How do you get rid of the thumb, actually? Does it just go?
You just did it.
Oh, cool. How did it do it by itself? So just...
I don't know how you find the thumb. Where is it?
Reactions.
Participants.
Okay,
Next
so
to
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I couldn't find how to change my name, though. So, Joe, you said you tap on your image to change.
You hover the mouse over your image, and you'll see the top right-hand corner, 3 little dots. Can you see that? Or do you have an image? Don't have an image.
No. Because I don't have it. Oh, I see. So if I start okay, you'll see me now all poorly. Let me try that.
That's it.
If I start, hang on.
Put your mouse on your image. 3 little dots at the top.
Okay.
Click on the 3 little
No,
dots.
I just get to the...
3 little dots at the top. No?
Yeah, only can see chat, meeting settings, raise hand, disconnect audio.
Yeah, there can be differences on.
Rename should be there. Perhaps it isn't.
Don't seem to have it. Maybe, yeah, I've done it from a laptop before. I'm on an iPad now. Maybe,
No,
yeah, maybe.
just checking. Joe, are you able to take notes now?
Yeah.
Great. Good. Okay, so people are starting to come back. Welcome back. Just waiting for everyone to rejoin us. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Nice. Good. So, we're just curious to hear just a few kind of points of feedback, popcorn style. What would you like to get from the call? And if there's, if you want to share something, raise your hand and unmute yourself. So curious to hear what you're hoping to get from the call. Yeah, Rosie?
I'll begin. I've chaired I've got an itchy nose. I've chaired quite a few meetings, but I wanted to know what the difference was between sort of chairing a meeting or just managing a meeting as opposed to a people's assembly, if there's different techniques.
It's a little bit hard to hear you. I couldn't hear the last bit.
If there's different techniques for, running a people's assembly as opposed to running a meeting.
Absolutely.
Say business meeting.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. You'll get a good understanding of the structure of it and what it actually involves in facilitating. Great. Hester, you had your hand up next.
Just realised we forgot.
So, Kevin, can you mute yourself? Is that possible? Great. Nice. There's a little one.
Yeah, we had a nice time. We had such a nice time chatting in our group. We forgot to talk about what we want to get from today. But I've been shadowing on some people's assemblies on Zoom, and I've found some situations that I've just observed quite difficult, and like different ones we might have an opportunity to share later. So I'm looking for ways to sort of, in a way, become more resilient, have more tools, not take anything personally, not let my own judgments take over or my own biases, and yeah, keeping that cool, calm demeanor and like staying true to the whole regenerative culture as well. And so I'm hoping to get insight into that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so we will definitely talk about how to deal with difficult interactions or challenging situations in a people's assembly. And I guess also as a group, we might, have some kind of different experiences to contribute. And also, of course, there's a huge element is just experience. Just kind of, as you said, you've been already sitting in and kind of shadowing. The more we get involved in participation of people's assemblies or facilitating or note taking, the more tools we have in our toolbox. But we'll definitely start to cover some of it. Great. VJ.
Yeah, I think similar. I've done quite a lot of facilitation and running working groups and trainings and all sorts of things, but I just feel that actually the People's Assembly is actually something which is needs to be really embedded in our culture, in the XR culture, especially sort of the more spontaneous sort of meetings you need to have on large actions. And I was very aware of, the one which I was part of at Marble Arch last year was very necessary, but it was put together quite quickly and needed to happen very quickly. So, and it seemed to work well. So I just wanted to get a bit more of a background and a few more tools in my sort of box.
Great. Good. Any more specific hopes or hopes what you are hoping to learn from this meeting? Anything more specific? Konstantin.
Yeah, maybe some secrets, not of the facilitation of people assembly, but for the trainings of facilitation.
Mm-hmm. Are there secrets? I don't know if there are any secrets, but we will say a little bit more if you want to get involved in actually becoming a trainer for People's Assembly facilitation trainings. So we will say a bit more at the end and give you suggestions to further links and so on. Yeah, great. Is there anyone else who would like to share what they're hoping to learn from this training? Good. So Joe took some of the what you just shared as notes, and we're going to come back to them right at the end just to make sure that we covered the points that of the things that you're hoping to learn. And yeah, I'll pass it on to Vicky. You're muted. Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry, yes, I was. Yeah, so we haven't done the links. It's actually the no. It should be the pillars now. It's Tim to talk about the pillars.
Oh yeah, sorry.
We're confused.
Okay, cool. So the 3 pillars of People's Assemblies. These are radical inclusivity, trusting the process, and active listening. So I'll talk a bit more about each of these. Radical inclusivity is, I think, just an incredibly important part of People's Assemblies and who we are as XR. It's really, really important that we don't just try to make sure we accept people, but we go out of our way to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. So a few ideas to help with those in the context of a People's Assembly. Before the assembly, trying to figure out who the missing voices are and how we might connect with them, and making sure that we run these in accessible spaces. So do we have disabled access? Do we have provision for children, comfort for older members? Do we have enough lighting? Essentially, is everyone enabled as much as we can try to make sure that they're able to be involved? No voices dominate, so we need to make sure that everyone is heard, and people involved should be being mindful of the question, why am I talking? When you are facilitating, there are some sort of useful questions or phrases to use, such as can we make sure we hear from people who haven't spoken yet, and let's make space for those who haven't spoken. Very non-confrontational ways to just try and communicate to people that we need everyone to be heard. And we should be mindful of how often it is that the people who are less dominant and the voices less dominant are often ones with the most useful points to make. Are there any barriers to engagement once people are involved? So is anyone hard of hearing? Make sure that people are willing to use the arm signals, etc., if they need to, if they need help. So I'll just read out the inclusivity statement. You've probably heard before, but it's really good to remember this when you're starting an assembly. So we value all voices equally in the assembly, as the aim is to hear the wisdom of the crowd gathered here and not to have the assembly dominated by individual voices or groups. We recognise that confident speakers are not always right, and those who are not confident speakers will often have the most useful ideas or opinions to put into the discussion. This is why we value all voices equally, and we ask you to do the same. We do not tolerate any calling out, abuse or shaming, and should conflicts arise in this way, there's a conflict resolution in place to help resolve this. We welcome all people, but not all behaviours. So, secondly, trust in the process. It's imperative that everyone involved does trust the process, and the facilitators and each other who are involved in any assembly. Facilitators can really help build that trust by both being really clear about what the process is and how they're going to use it, and then sticking to that. I mentioned earlier how some hand gestures can be considered difficult ones to use, but they're not. If you really set them out early, you set out how you're going to communicate, what you're going to say and when and why, and then you stick to that and you use it for everyone and you use it evenly, it can really helps maintain the trust. And the final part, final pillar, active listening. So active listening within a people's assembly allows the possibility of us learning and having our minds changed. A people's assembly isn't an area for intellectual jousting. Something to watch out for as a facilitator is fingers going up as soon as someone else starts speaking, someone else puts a finger up. You know that person isn't necessarily spending their time really focusing on what someone's saying, and they're too eager to make their own point. So I'm going to hand over to Petra next, unless got any more points on the pillars to introduce active listening exercise.
Great, thank you, Tim. So active listening is actually one of the key ingredients. So we're really starting to hear what other people are saying. And very often when we have conversation with people, we're just kind of quite busy in our minds to offload what is actually in our mind, what is happening with our opinion. And when we actually practice to really be present with what the other person is saying, we can actually start to co-create something that will emerge in a people's assembly. And active listening, some people are familiar with it, and for some people it is also an ongoing practice. For some people it's a completely new concept. So active listening is really listening from the heart, nearly like hugging someone with your full attention. And it's also a gift to, when someone is really actively listening, the person who is speaking can really come to a place of finding their own truth, what is there for this person. And it's a real gift, and especially for people who are less confident in speaking in groups, it really can help people to find what is there for them. It also means that we don't interrupt or kind of have kind of really pressing questions, to just see what's emerging from the person, and not what is my curiosity, what kind of piece of information do I want to get in, but just purely to be present with what the person is bringing in their own time as well. And so now we have an active listening exercise. We're going to put you in pairs, and in this kind of allocated time of 3 minutes, really try to practice with the kind of, when you're starting with the listening, just purely being with what the person is saying. And maybe for 2.5 minutes, the person is just sitting in silence. And just see if you can find this kind of calm in yourself to really be present with the person. And then also when you actually share, it really helps to listen. When you speak, you use I statements. So try to use what is true for you and what is present for you. And that really helps with the listening as well. So the question we would like you to talk about in your pairs, in which we're going to put you on in a moment, is people's assemblies and why they matter to me. I'm going to put this question in the chat. And then after 3 minutes, Joe will give you a little nod. And then it's time to change. And then after the 3 minutes, you will come back and have a moment to debrief how that exercise was for you. Are there any pressing questions on that? Good. So Joe, you're gonna put people into their breakout groups.
Hi, Constantine.
Hi, Hassan.
I think we met each other once before on another Zoom a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Maybe it was Action Wellbeing.
Could be. Can't remember. Yeah, some call.
Would you like to begin? We've got 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Mom.
Yeah. I think well, I used to believe in and to be operating in collectives, and it's not kind of it's not happening by chance. Nobody can do anything alone. We do need to cooperate, build groups, sometimes big groups, movements, to do things, to change things. And it's not always easy. For some objectives, it could be like more or less standard approaches with authority, with power, with hierarchy. Sometimes it's okay. But if it is really something big, you need to engage many people, basically. Especially if you face kind of big authorities, power, or corporates, and the people you need to collaborate are just citizens, and we are all the same, more or less. We have the same power, the same kind of voice, and we still need to find a way to cooperate. Yeah, and it doesn't happen just naturally. We need to use some kind of techniques that we share, basically, more or less the same language that you can use, the same kind of hand signals or protocols, and basically people's assembly is that kind of tool that is inclusive, that can be used in big collectives, and it's not only the tool to solve a specific problem, it's also the tool to build trust. So pretty simple. So within XR, it's one of the key elements that helps it be successful. So far, so good. I see very many kind of protest groups across Russia, and they can't grow. They got big objectives. In principle, many people are interested in that objective, but they can't get organized. And it's as simple as that. They can't agree on anything. Can't build that process that can generate agreements, results, decisions.
It's 2.5 minutes. Oh, they're timing for us. Are we talking about anything we want to right now? Do we have? What are we talking about exactly?
About the People's Assembly. Why do they matter to you?
Yeah. I think I grew up with a lot of people who didn't have any sort of political awareness or understanding, or feel that they had a part to play in democracy. They felt like they're disempowered, small, insignificant, and that continues. And I see it daily. I see it in my own family. I see it with my partner. He didn't vote for many, many years. And it feels there's this, I think, what I see, there's this deep mistrust. Well, it doesn't matter what they do. It's not going to be for us anyway. It's to benefit the 1%, it's to benefit the rich. So it doesn't matter what I do. That kind of logic, which says, there's no point. I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to participate. I don't want to be heartbroken all over again. So I'm not going to stick my neck out or use my energy to affect this change. So what seems to happen here is you hear the same voices. And it's like in local council, there are councillors who might be from like ethnic minorities, but still they don't really seem that interested in politics or in really making change. They still seem to just go along with the status quo. And I've always been like ready to stand up and ready to be an unpopular target. I don't mind that. So like at school and college and university, and no one wanted to do those jobs, those student council or being the reps or anything like that. I would always stand up and say, yeah, I'll do it. I'll speak for people. And there was just a despondency everywhere. I didn't really learn even what the difference between right wing and left wing was until I was in my 20s. I really grew up in this like desert of political thinking and philosophy. And I want to know how to excite people about governing their own futures. I want to know how to engage and spread that excitement, make people, or help, or whatever it is, to help people feel not that small, helpless, insignificant person, but the opposite. To feel
I'm going to press unmute so that they can be mute.
One.
That's a mute, everyone.
Good. Okay, so we now have wow, Joe, there's a pink room. Great. So we now have just really briefly, it would be nice to hear from you. How did you actually experience to be actively listened to? So how was it for you to be sharing in a space where someone's actively listening? Goes.
I thought it was very powerful, actually, very moving. And it just, I'm just trying to think when's the last time actually somebody's done that in even your friends and your family settings. I don't think that doesn't happen very often. Everybody has an opinion and everybody wants to make their opinion. And it was very powerful and moving just to have somebody to really listen to you, even in this crazy little thing we've got going with Zoom. It's just nice for me sort of just to listen to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else who would like to share the experience? Vijay.
Yeah, I think I had more to say because I knew I had the space to say it. So I didn't feel I had to say anything, but I felt that there was a opportunity to actually examine what I was feeling without any sort of judgment. So yeah, it was positive. You know, I felt I did go off the subject a little bit, I think, but it is still stuff I wanted to say. So it was good. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And how was it actually to listen? You know, how was it for you to really be present with the person and just purely be in a listening space? And I'm aware that Hester, you had your hand up. Any of you would like?
It was to your last question actually, but to say that I think it's also scary to speak without hiding behind anything. To understand, oh, now someone's really listening to me. Well, it better be worth listening to. It's like almost being really accountable for your words, and there's something quite frightening about that. Like, I'm naked now, you know, you can see me, you can hear me, you can actually hear what I'm saying, and I can't make any excuses for you not listening because you're really listening. So there is something, it's like, am I really going to speak? And do my words have weight?
Great, thank you. Yeah, so is there, taking a point from Joel? You're running behind time. No.
Kevin?
You're running behind time? What?
No, Kevin.
Kevin. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna add very, very quickly that active listening is really enjoy that process. I learned very recently in what's called an empathy circle. I was in a call where it's the same concept of active listening, but you reflect back what you heard that person say. And that's even one added level of clarity in addition to active listening that I found quite nice to use.
How was, Kevin, how was the experience now for you, the present experience that you just had of actually actively listening to someone?
That was great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for that, for the space for that. Thank you.
Great. Is there anyone else who hasn't shared yet who would like to share how it actually was to actively listen to someone? To really be in this listening space? I see Vijay's hand up and just kind of waiting if anyone else wants to share or hasn't shared. Okay, Vijay, go for it.
I know I've just said something about it from the other angle, but from the listening point of view, I thought it was interesting because I knew this was an exercise. I was watching my response, and there was 2 or 3 times while my partner was talking, I wanted to actually respond to something, and it was like, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting sort of response, because I was just noticing that is what I tend to do. I tend to want to interact rather than just listen. So I thought it was a useful exercise.
Great. Thank you. And also just to acknowledge that depending on the gender that we are kind of socialized into, there's a tendency that people who are kind of socialized into female kind of conditioning, is more the tendency to listen, and for men maybe they're sometimes more confident in actually speaking. So just to be aware of these, how does it feel for us to be in different spaces? Great. So now we'll pass it on to Vicky.
Yeah, so I'll just very briefly say this. When we have a People's Assembly, there are 3 sections to it. There's the input section, the deliberation section, and the output, which is also called the integration. The input can vary in length depending on what sort of assembly. If you're going to listen to people with special knowledge, that part will be longer, or it could be people reflecting their own feelings, and then deliberation it can be longer or shorter according to the urgency or the weight of what you're discussing, and outputs will depend on where they're going, how much time that takes. That's also when you integrate all the people's views and turn into something people can agree with. But it's just to remember those 3 sections. They can typically be about a third each, but it will vary according to the function. And you will let people know at the beginning how long the whole thing will take, so that they are aware of how much time commitment they're making. And I will just do that very briefly, because we're going to greater depth in a minute. And am I passing it on to you? I forgot.
That's on to me. So
the roles, that's right. Sorry, Tim.
That's fine. So each assembly needs a lead facilitator overall for the overall running of the assembly, timekeeping, delivery of relevant information. Ideally, there should be 1 or more co-facilitators, and when there is more than 1 facilitator, it's really important to try to have some diversity, whether that's ethnicity, gender, and the experience of running PAs. You should always be ready to support new assembly facilitators running their first one. It's new for a lot of people, so it's good to be mindful of that. The other thing you'll need is an assembly note taker. So that's someone who's responsible for recording the results of the assembly and of the feeding back phase of the assembly, and passing those results back to wherever they're destined to go, such as centralised results online, into a coordinators meeting, etc. The destination of what's generated in the assembly needs to be clearly defined before the start of the assembly and clearly communicated to them. Petra?
Great. Yeah, also to add that to that, that's really important element in order to build trust in the group, so people actually know that their feedback is valued and is taken somewhere. And then we're moving into starting the People's Assembly is we start with an input phase, and that really depends on kind of how much time you have with the planning of the People's Assembly. So let's say Vicky, she gave this really interesting example of, you're in a rebellion and it's a spontaneous People's Assembly, so really something like called a People's Choice, where you kind of in the moment you're reacting to a question. You might ask the crowd to give 3 or 4 suggestions of a topic they want to hold this People's Assembly on. You do a kind of a voting temperature check, and then you decide what is the topic that you're going to hold the People's Assembly on. Now, if you have more time to actually plan and prepare the People's Assembly, it's really important that the facilitator is framing the question. And it's important to get a sense of what's actually on people's minds. So what we've done previously is kind of to do a call on a Telegram to get people to vote, maybe. So just so you know that the topic that you're holding the People's Assembly is on is actually relevant and people are actually interested to talk about the subject. it can also give people the chance to read up and get information before they're actually joining the People's Assembly. So it's quite good to make it public to make the topic public on which the People's Assembly is on. Then in the input phase now, it's really important. So when you organize the information that you're giving the people before they're actually going into their discussion groups, it's very important to give people a 360-degree insight as much as possible. Because if you give people just a section of information, you will very much influence the outcome of the People's Assembly, which makes sense. So it's very important that you're trying to get information from various different angles to the subject. So the tools through which you can do that is to either show a video, you can have a discussion, like a panel, so you can invite people, specialists, to give piece of information. Now, really important is that the panel is not an opinion-based conversation. It's really about information. And that's very important to be very sharp on that, because, again, otherwise, the People's Assembly can be very easily influenced. You can also have a testify piece. It's like an open mic where you can invite people from the crowd in to share a personal experience on a certain topic. So people can start to relate more personally to the specific topic. And so now, really important, a key element of a People's Assembly is really the question. So you want to kind of start the question open enough to collect the wisdom of the crowd, but focus enough to keep the outcome clear and the discussion focused. So quite a good way to say that is to start the question with something like, how to, or how might we, how might we grow the XR community, for example, So that's a really good way to look for possible, to kind of touch on the collective wisdom in that way. So that's the input phase. And then after the input phase, when you prepared people, you gave people a piece of information, you then move into the deliberation. So in the deliberation, it would be kind of groups, discussion groups, depending on how many people are in the People's Assembly, between 6 or 8, possibly up to 12. So now, let's say you have a group of 250 people. Just in terms of the feedback you need to manage, it's better to have bigger groups. So it's something that needs a bit gauging. So depending on how many people are actually taking part. So in each group, you're going to have a note taker and a facilitator. So to ensure that, or to help to actually get a facilitator, someone who's confident facilitating in each discussion group, you can start with asking in the crowd who has experience or who would like to facilitate, ask people to raise their hand, and around this person you can ask people to build groups of 6 to 8 people. That way you kind of know, or you can get a sense to people actually in each group, do you have someone who's willing to facilitate. Then just before you start the discussion group, you're going to clarify the question. It really helps to write the question out so people can always go back to it. And then also the note taker could write down the question somewhere visible for the whole group. So it really helps to keep the focus of the discussion. So then the note taker would be like taking notes of the important points and also noting down which points are very popular that can really help in the consolidation part. And it's very important that the note taker is using the words of the people. So very important is that the note taker is not interpreting or analyzing or kind of summarizing in some way. So important is that the note taker is really so, and it's probably quite helpful if the group is just checking that the notes which are taken are actually what people said. So that's a really important point. And what other? I'm just going through my notes to see if there's something else. Yeah, and then to be clear of how much time for discussion there is, and as the lead facilitator would also give maybe a 10-minute warning before the end of the discussion phase, so the group actually has at least 10 minutes to consolidate the points that are then get fed back. It's also really important that the groups know how many points you want to get fed back. Maybe it's just one if there are loads of people, or 3 if you want to get more feedback. So yeah, it's very important that people know how much time they have for the discussion groups, and that they have enough warning. Yeah, and then moving to the output and integration, which Tim is going to talk about.
Sure, thanks. So once people come back from their deliberations, the lead facilitator should call the note takers to come to the front of the assembly. Each note taker should give feedback back to the whole group, and ideally, as a facilitator, try and make sure that everyone can hear, particularly when it's a big group. That it can be quite tricky when people have come to the front. You need to try and make sure people can hear, because you want the assembly to use their wavy hands to indicate the support for what they're hearing back, and that's useful for the whole assembly note taker to understand the support. So ideally, the assembly note taker will be writing it down on a big piece of paper somewhere that people can see. It's sometimes people default to a technical solution, but those aren't great here. It's good to be able to have a blackboard, a whiteboard, a piece of paper, something that's more visual and engaging. The assembly note taker should verify the points that they've made to make sure that the assembly agrees, and finally the note taker will be responsible for feeding back those results to that destination, wherever it may be, the online results, coordinators meeting, etc.
Great. I think that's all the kind of the dense content, and we've walked through it fairly briefly. Thank you, Tim. Are there any specific questions now to what we covered? Shazia. Sorry if I say it wrong.
Hi, sorry, it's Cheshire.
Cheshire,
I got stuck on like a waiting thing, and I'm a bit late coming back. What did I miss after the talk between us in pairs? Sorry.
We covered the input, deliberation, and output phase. As we are all, maybe the best thing for you would be to go into the practice round, so you get a sense of it, and then we will send you some more detailed information you can read up on. But I don't want to go through everything again, otherwise, people would be kind of, they need to hear twice. Yeah, is that okay with you? Cool. Any other questions? Joel?
Hello. It's about the breakout rooms. So when you talk about enough time for people to discuss, to talk, if you have 5 people, how much time you think is the minimum or a good time? Or if you have 8 or 10 people, how much time you should give to them?
Yeah, good point. So I think 5 people is a bit too small, because you need to think, okay, there's one person who's note-taking and one person who's facilitating. And these people can't really take part in the discussion. And maybe that's something to be really kind of explicit about, because the person who's facilitating is really, their job is really to facilitate the discussion and be in service of the process. So, and the note taker is really busy taking notes. So if you have 5 people, -2, you have 3 people, is kind of too small for a discussion to actually unfold. So that's why we say minimum is 6 people. So usually depending on the subject and the question, I think 20 minutes purely discussion time goes by really quickly. And then you would have 10 minutes of consolidating the points. So half an hour discussion time is really the minimum that I would say, so people feel actually they can start to get into the subject and the question. If you have larger groups, obviously it makes sense to allow a little bit more time. So maybe you can push it to 25-30 minutes. Now, if the discussion time is too long, it loses focus and energy. People only have an amount of, time is a resource, and people only have a limited kind of attention span. So I'd say then in a larger discussion group, keep it to half an hour discussion max, and then 10 minutes consolidation, and that's already a lot. Great. Pete.
Yeah, a question about during the integration and feedback. So you've got like the lead facilitator, and you've got a note taker, and the people coming up making their points. And I think Tim was saying you want to be watching to see whether a lot of people, when points are read out, are being so. That's quite a lot to hold as a facilitator. Do you have a co-facilitator who's specifically looking for crowd reaction and kind of going, that's a really popular point and that one didn't get much response?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're working as a team a lot, like. Yeah,
absolutely. It also just means, because it takes so much focus, for the note taker and the facilitator to manage. I mean, the output phase is really the phase where it kind of, you've been you've been in attention a long time, and to have 2 facilitators to hold that output phase is really good, is really helpful. And it's also really good to say, like, okay, really actively invite people to take part, to give temperature check feedback, because that's the time where people feel a bit exhausted and tired. And to then say, oh yeah, I can see that's a really popular point, or you can say, I don't see that many hands. It's good to actually say it, to just keep the energy up, and yeah, 2 facilitators are good. Rosie.
When you're doing the feedback at the end, you said don't summarize. In a sense, you use people's words, don't summarize. Would you then, if somebody wrote up a point and then another, and everybody agreed, and then somebody else said the point again, from another group, would you just say, no, look, we've already had that sort of thing, and that's been agreed? There must come an element of summary somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky kind of thing, and you need to really feel into it. Now, if at the output phase you get 1 point fed back again, you can say, oh, fantastic, so we have a real agreement on this point. That's really great. We can see some real kind of overlap there from different groups. Fantastic. Now, of course, in the feedback and in the consolidation, there is a process of summary. It needs to be. And also, sometimes you lose certain detail, which is in itself, it's tricky. And also and it really helps to say in the beginning of the People's Assembly that not every point can get fed back. It's more like to get an idea of where the crowd is. Yeah, so it's about also managing people's expectations, because sometimes people feel really disappointed that their point is not exactly get fed back. And to say, in the People's Assembly, also really important is the cross-pollination of ideas. the people are heard. Different people hear your points, and also it's a way of building connection, between different people and different opinions. And there's a process of summary that's happening. Is there one last question, maybe, and then we have a little comfort break? Joe from Germany.
A quick question about facilitation. Very often we say it's good to have a kind of professional, someone with experience to facilitate, for example, the breakup groups. But I have some experience that you nominate someone and then you explain what the person has to do, and it goes pretty well. So is it really necessary to have someone that has a large experience to do this facilitation in breakup groups, or we can actually really rely on people that don't have experience, but they have thought how to do it and just do it?
Really good point. And I think as a movement, we want to encourage people to step up and do facilitation. I think that's really important, that we empower and help to spread the skill and encourage people. What can be useful is when you're planning a people's assembly to actually allocate maybe something like 10 minutes. So people who are interested in facilitation, you can actually have some specific time and walk them through the really important key points of facilitation before you start the people's assembly. So that's a way how you can support new facilitators to step up. I think it's important that people who are willing to facilitate, and someone, so you don't, so to say, force people to facilitate in a way. Great. So if there are no more pressing questions, I would say we have a really brief 5-minute comfort break. So water in, water out, and come back, because we're running a little bit behind time. We're back 35 past.
Right.
So how much are we? 12 minutes. So
How much are we behind, Tim? Or?
I think like 12 minutes or so, a little bit more. Let's see if we can kind of keep the dealing with difficult interactions, but condensed.
Mm.
It doesn't look that far behind. Going from the timings in the script, it adds up to 1 hour 40 minutes left, and 10 minutes of that says closing circle, which don't really do that anyway. That adds up to 1 hour 30 minutes. That's the amount of time we got left. But I think our exercises that we do takes a little bit longer than in the script.
Okay.
Because everybody is going to have a go.
Yeah.
It's great.
Good.
So it may be, and there might be need to find 10 minutes to cut down or something. It's not too far out.
Good.
I'm not. I mean, we've had worse.
Phew, with your amount of experience.
Hello. I was talking to someone from India, and he went through a digital people's assemblies with 3 breakout rooms. And there was a expert talk at the beginning, and then 3 questions. Then one much easier, then one more complicated, and the last one more complicated. He said that was interesting because it built up on the knowledge related to the subject, so they had time actually to stop, think about it, and go for it again, and then stop and think about it, and then the knowledge they got from the subject was much more intense than a normal people's assemblies. I found it quite interesting. He said it was really powerful. I don't know if you have come across this.
Yes, we've done things like that with a number of speakers speaking fairly briefly so people don't get exhausted. And that has strongly influenced the quality of discussion and the ideas that came out. And then if we want to do an assembly where we don't want to put any ideas into anybody's heads, then we omit that phase at first until people have got some of their own ideas first, and then you bring the speakers in. But yes, it's absolutely vital. As I was saying, if you want more advanced decisions, people need good information first. It's a great idea.
Great. So I hope everyone is back now. Let's get back onto let's continue with the training, so we can honor our time commitment. Vicky.
Okay. Yeah. So some people have mentioned difficulties, difficult behaviours, difficult interactions. I'm just wondering if anyone has any examples of problems of that kind, either in assembly or elsewhere, how it was dealt with well or badly, and then we can look at those live examples and see if anyone's got any ideas of better or good ways to handle them. So if anyone can come up with any examples. Any experiences of difficult interactions and what did or didn't work? No ideas. I can feed a few in, but it'd be helpful if anyone can think of anything. I'm sure you must have haven't had that perfect lives. I mean, one of my problems I find is that when someone's speaking who really annoys me, I find myself getting emotionally angry with them, and that's hopeless as a facilitator. You have to find a way out of that personal reaction in order to respond usefully to them. Given a good example was when we were sitting around and we were talking about what we needed for education. It was one of these big, and somebody said, we need to teach children to shoot. And I thought, what's this? To kill. And I said, why? And he said, because that's what they're going to need in the future that is going ahead. So then a good reaction was to find out what was underneath his concern. And what I said was, so we need to teach children things that are useful in the future. And everyone agreed with that. So we found the common place. So sometimes that's a useful thing to do, find what's behind their motivation. Has anyone else got any ideas?
Vicky, can I just kind of add something, because you said something extremely useful. I just kind of want to elaborate on that a little bit more. This can also really be very useful if you don't find agreement in the group, to actually highlight what is the underlying need of someone's proposition or statement. And when you then come to, in Vicky's example, actually teaching children useful skills for the future, I mean, that's something that probably 90% of the people are actually agree with. So rather than getting too focused on what it actually is, to actually find what's the underlying need.
Yeah.
And that's a really good way to bridge understanding again. And
thank you for sharing. Yes, that's right.
Really good.
Sorry. There's also people who speak too long, and you really want other voices to come in. And there's ways you can say that you've really heard them. You can either summarise what they're saying very briefly. You can say that's a very good point, or many people share your views. And can we bring in someone else now who hasn't spoken? I'm aware of time. So you can find sort of little phrases to help you move on in a way which is not confrontational from someone who likes to talk a lot. It could be they're very valuable.
Hester, I'm also aware that you had. Hester, you're back. I just realized you're back in the call, because you mentioned in the beginning that you had some challenging experiences or something you wanted to learn a bit more tools around how to deal with difficult interactions. I'm wondering if you had an experience that you're willing to share from People's Assembly or facilitation.
Yeah, the most recent one was yesterday morning in a Trust the People webinar. And in my breakout room, the guy with me was from America, and he said, I'm gonna be honest, I've got an agenda. I want to tell you about my project. So the breakout room, the purpose was to discuss what we thought of the presentation, how we thought it could help our communities, and what we think our communities need. So I was a bit like, oh right, okay. So he didn't have any desire to take part at all. And then it was all very weird, and I was very thrown by it. And then one of the women doing the presentation, she came into the group with me. It was small. There was only 6 of us on the call, so she was one of the people in our breakout room. And I was quite lucky because she did come in, and then he carried on, and he said, I'm just going to share my screen, and blah, blah, blah. And then he started teaching us his website, and it was a system where you give yourself points for your ideologies, and then and it's the most important system there is for Citizens Assembly, and he's held Citizens Assembly for years, and he was just heralding himself over and over and over and over.
That sounds like clearly the wrong use of your group, and I don't know what. So, anyone got any suggestions of how the facilitator should have interrupted that, or what they should have said? I mean, I always have ideas. I mean, what you can say is that project sounds fantastic, but this isn't the place for it. Because he sounds like clearly he knew he had an agenda, he knew what he was doing, he didn't need to be handled too gently, he just needs told that's a very valuable project, but this isn't the place for that. Perhaps we could, if others want to, share your contact details, and other people can get in touch with you to hear more. So, would that be useful? Something along those lines?
And I also would like to add on that, as a facilitator, you're in service of the process. So you're not in service to a person who's dominating. And your job is really to hold the process and make sure that everyone is heard equally. So if someone is really dominating with ideas or with their agenda, a discussion, you can really say, we're in a People's Assembly, we're talking about this subject, this is the question that we all agreed on talking about, and that's what we will come back to, and you can continue this conversation or show your project in another space or something. And that's really important as a facilitator to be really clear on that, because in some ways you have the trust of the group, and they trusted you with kind of facilitating the discussion. So that's really important to honor the trust of the group.
Does that help, Hester? Yes, Hester.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of tried to do that. I said, so we've been asked to discuss this. I'm like, what do you think of the presentation? He went, well, it just goes without saying. And I said, what? And he said, well, we should ask to trust the people. So he was just everything that I kind of gave to say, right, I hear you. And then Anira did that. She said, so why didn't you tell me about it after this is finished? And they did stay on the call. And
so what was important there was to move on to somebody else, because very often when
it was only me and him.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there's nobody else.
We was just us two, and then Anira. So I was trapped with him. But there was a different situation. I'll just tell you very quickly, where a woman interrupted a presentation. She just put her hand up, and the guy went, "Oh yeah, do you have a question?" And then she carried on by saying, "So I think what you should do with your slides is," and she started critiquing him on the session, and both situations just brought up all this anger in me. And then I was stuck with that. For the next 3 days, I just felt really cross.
Again, in that way, it's really important to be clear in facilitation, and also to say that, time is a resource. And if people came to the space to agree on a certain kind of discussion, it's really to honor what people came here for and use the time that they dedicated, they agreed on bringing on the subject. And if there are other things that come up, there could be a space afterwards. And again, that's really important and clear. You're holding, as a facilitator, you're holding that space.
I think Joe had a point. Sorry, is that right, Smith?
Yeah, people that want to talk or are talking too much, very often they are so motivated in doing it that you try to interrupt them, say, or make this sign, or try to interrupt, and they just don't look at you and they don't listen to you. So how to not be too rude, because you can actually say, hey, stop. Hey, can you hear me? You stop now. I mean, it's pretty rude saying something like that. So do you have any formula?
Does anybody else? Someone's got a raised hand, Moses, and I've got a point after that. Moses first.
Thank you very much, Claire. I just thought that there is some information I'm bringing that might be useful.
Can you speak up a bit?
Can you speak up? Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a bit better.
Okay, so I was saying there is a bit of information I can bring so that I find a little leeway. I observed the radio stations limiting people to having to talk for 8 seconds per slot. And because rules were maintained very tight, a lot of people started making away or doing away with extraneous information. They go straight to the point and see what they wanted done, or they want the radio station to take notice of during any phone-in program. So I think if we limited people during these conversations to say you have 50 seconds to say what you want,
thank you.
A lot of time.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So one of the points you made there was to ask them to come to the point, and the other is to give them a time limit, which is very valuable. Thank you. As it happens on Zoom, you can also mute people, although that sounds a bit drastic. You can also say, I'm going to have to stop you there because, the final note in your voice, if you've got a situation of resistance, which is unmanageable. But thank you, Moses, that was useful. Petra?
Yeah, just also something that you can say is just to honor, sometimes people don't feel heard, and just to say, I hear that this point is really important to you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And now, because we have limited time, I want to give other people also the chance to share their opinion on this subject. As simple as that. And if someone keeps on kind of interrupting, it's you can also say, we've heard you several times before, thank you. And now, we have another kind of 10 minutes left. I would really like to hear other people's, so we can actually hear the collective wisdom on the subject, or something like that.
And I'm also aware of our own time now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. It is quite useful sometimes to bring back to the topic we're supposed to be doing, or to remind of time. Petra.
Fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. So now we are actually moving into an exercise where you will all have the chance to practice or to actually do facilitation, and one round of note taking as well. So in a group of 5 to 6, Joe will do the maths and the breakout groups. You will each have a time to facilitate for 5 minutes. And to note take, and then just rotate, decide who's going next. So everyone has the chance to do both of the roles, and then after that, we will give you 5 more minutes to consolidate a point. So we want everyone to feedback 2 main points on the question. So you'll have 5 minutes to consolidate 2 points. And then you have another 5 minutes to reflect on the facilitation. What did you experience was good facilitation, and what do you think could be done better next time? But don't worry, we will give you the questions to you again in the little notes. The question that we would like you to talk about is how do we grow the XR community? And which I'm going to put in the chat. And so, also for the note takers, it doesn't really matter where you take notes. It can be useful if you put them in your chat, because once you're in the breakout group, you only as a group can see the notes. Does that work, Joe? Technically? Or on a separate sheet. Important is then that you take the notes. Sorry. Well, decide in your group whether you want to take notes on a document or on a piece of paper. So each person has the chance to do note taking. Good. Sorry, that was a bit confusing. Are there any questions on the exercise? Right. So Joe will put you in some groups.
Right. So I'm going to unmute everybody. I warn you before I unmute everybody. And
so 2 groups of 5 because Maria is not. She just said.
Oh, okay. Okay, Maria. You don't have to press join, so you will get a join link, but you don't have to press it. And then I'm going to open all the groups.
I know. We have 1 group of 5 and 1 of 6.
Right.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Konstantin, you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, there's Moses who's not on video.
Is Moses there? Are you there, Moses?
I'm here. I can't use video right now.
Okay, cool. It's okay.
Okay. So how should we divvy up the roles to begin with?
I'm happy to facilitate the first one. Okay. The first few minutes.
Go for it.
Who note take? I'll note take the first one then, and then we'll carry on from there.
Okay. Shall we just quickly say who we are? I think we all know each other. VJ, he.
I'm Rosie. I'm from Brighton.
I'm Pete. I'm from Lancaster.
Москва.
And Moses?
Yes, I can hear you.
Cool. Okay, so the question we have is how do we grow the XR community? So is there anyone who wants to kick off on any ideas? Oh, first of all, is someone taking notes? Who's the note taker? Rosie, thank you, Rosie. Anyone want to kick off with any ideas?
I think I should have a quick say because I have multiple problems here. One, my battery is low and I don't have power. Secondly, I don't have a video because my device has a problem, so I can only do audio. So, but one, I think we can grow our XR community by impacting communities directly with resources. And in my local community, what I find very will be very helpful in growing XR is XR's ability to bring knowledge to people about their local problems.
Okay, Moses, sorry, I didn't hear you that well. Can I just clarify what you just said? Did you say that it's important to have more resources? Something about resources in your local community?
Yes, knowledge resources. Knowledge. Because like we're talking about getting people to talk about their local issues. In my place, this is not happening. So XR's ability to organize people that's the resource. XR's ability to organize people is going to impact us positively. Because people will be addressing their own local solutions using XR's approaches.
Okay, Moses, does anyone else want to comment on that or make any more practical suggestions about how that Moses' community could be helped or grown? Pete?
Yeah, I think that's really important what Moses said. In this strange experience we've got of COVID at the moment, actually Extinction Rebellion is sort of coming into its own because we're already organising, we're talking to each other, we're able to do things in terms of mutual aid and putting graffiti and artwork out on the streets and things that people just see people doing. They don't see Extinction Rebellion doing it. In fact, we've found here that if you don't put an Extinction Rebellion logo on your graffiti, people just see, oh, people can interact, oh, people can organise, oh, people can do stuff. Actually putting Extinction Rebellion and growing the Extinction Rebellion community might not be what we need to do. We might just need to be growing community. And I think that's something in there of what Moses said.
Okay, Hester, did you want to come in there?
Sorry, it's just said that we should swap facilitators and note takers.
Okay.
So who's going to be the next facilitator?
Well, I'll hold facilitation for a while.
Okay, and who's going to be the note taker? Thank you, Hester. Okay, over to you then, Pete.
Well, I'm waiting for someone to speak.
I think just to pass over, Pete, from my last facilitation, I think Hester did hold her hand up, so I'm not sure. Was that anything, Hester?
I was agreeing with Pete.
All right, okay, thank you.
Rose.
I think it's important that people feel that XR can address their concerns locally as well as nationally. So I'm sort of agreeing with Moses that you know, in Brighton, of course, the big thing is parking. You know, and if people, you know, if you wanted to involve people, you might have to involve people on the basis of we have a problem with cars and parking in the area. You know what I mean? Whatever is the local issue, you know, just get people involved through that.
Konstantin?
Yeah, I can share the experience we got here in Russia for about a couple of months. We did experience difficulties to engage people with XR. Technically, there is no climate emergency on agenda in Russia, as official or unofficial, and there is no experience or culture of civil disobedience in this country. No, almost zero. At the same time, we need to do at least something in this country. It's important. What we decided to do, it's a very small group of people, means we, to set up a school of civil protest, we call it, civil resilience, not resilience, of civil protest in English. And what we do, we share the experience, the technologies, including People's Assembly, with local protest groups. There are probably a couple of dozens different protest groups. They're trying to resist construction projects, sometimes trash dumps, refineries, etc., and local communities trying to to resist. And it's very difficult for them to get organized, basically, to plan good actions, to get good campaign, because they have no experience. It's ordinary people trying to protect their homes. And within XR, we do have that. And instead of asking them to join XR and fight climate change, basically, we go to them with trainings, seminars, case studies, and basically try to help them. That's how we get connected. More or less, it's a national style movements. Sometimes they're branded groups, and we learn each other. We learn that there is a kind of climate problem, global problem. We get connected emotionally, personally, and over time, I guess, we can kind of build a national coalition for climate. It's not only a local problem, because local problem is normally a symptom of a bigger story. That's our approach, and I think this trust the people. Maybe Hester can tell us more. It's the new program of XR UK is about in the same direction.
I think we've been told to change the facilitator and note taker again.
Can I just check, Moses, can you hear us? Have you gone? Hello, Moses, have you had... I think Moses was having technical problems. None of us can hear Moses, and we can't see a chat reply from him. Okay, so we're down to 5. Someone going to take over facilitating?
I'll take over the facilitating, someone else for the note-taking.
I can do the note-taking.
BJ note-taking. Okay, here we go.
I'd like to respond... Yeah, thank you. I'd like to respond to Konstantin. I'm also concerned about Moses. I remember being on a call. There was a person in Uganda, and because the Wi-Fi just couldn't cope with the videos, and it helped for us to turn off our videos sometimes. So I've just written to him in the chat. Maybe if he responds, we could try that. The Trust the People project, it's emerged over the past few weeks, well, since the lockdown, actually, the first conversations came, and it was consulting the people. So it began as workshops, how can we engage with the community now? What's XR's role now? And it's just that, actually, what you're saying, Konstantin, that it's going to, it's listening, seeing what's being done, what's needed. So the mutual aid groups, I think they were started by an anarchist group. Anyway, it just spread very quickly. There's a website called Mutual Aid COVID-19, and there's 4,000 mutual aid groups across the UK that we know of. So I think a lot of XR people were doing that naturally, were going and joining the mutual aid groups. And then in some places in the UK, the XR members seem to be quite resistant, because they're like, well, that's not XR. So the first workshop or webinar in this Trust the People project is that, how do you engage? What's your community? Who is around you? How do you engage with them? What do they need? And then the next step is to propose that we introduce neighbourhood assemblies. But if you go on the presentation, you'll see that they say a lot about the history of these times in the past and what's happened. After the Second World War, we got the NHS. So what's going to happen now? We can get something actually really meaningful and important to us all, or same trajectory, the same pathway. Our society will crumble more and more and more. So that's where it's at, and we have just people now emailing and saying, yes, I want to be part of this, and they get training, just like you're doing, Konstantin. So they get modules and training and Zoom calls and support, and it's evolving weekly.
Good point. Anybody want to add to that in any way, or make another comment before we change facilitators, because it's just flashed up again?
May I ask what the discussion point was when I was kicked out? I missed it.
How do we grow the XR community? That was the discussion group. How do we grow the XR community?
May I comment again?
Do you want to, does somebody want to take over facilitating first of all, because we've just come to an end of that?
I haven't seen that message.
Oh, it came up on my screen on the top.
Oh,
you might as well carry on, I think.
Okay. Hester, what were you saying?
I just don't know whether anyone else agrees. I feel in the UK, XR has become quite polarising. There's a lot of sort of unforgiving press coverage from the October Rebellion that people just won't forget. Like in London, it was the tube action. It doesn't seem to be able to shift that. I think the Cambridge digging up the lawn at the university also, that went very badly, and that's and then we kind of stopped getting any kind of press coverage for what was some quite beautiful actions. Like I was at Waterloo Bridge on International Women's Day, and that barely made the papers. And so in previous calls like this, we seem to be finding this agreement, or that's why I'm wondering what you think, that the actions actually are not going to cut it anymore.
Pete, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think you might have missed I would agree with what Hester's just said, and that if it's just people organising things like Konstantin was saying, fighting a local rubbish dump, just organising as people and doing stuff as people and doing stuff as these mutual aid groups, we maybe just, all we need to do is just stop putting the logo everywhere and just carry on doing stuff.
Anybody, any comments? Any other comments? VJ?
Yeah, I'm sort of fully behind the mutual aid and local groups and doing stuff. I think we still need to consider what are that the whole sort of climate emergency isn't sidelined. because I think there's the danger that that people do get on with useful local stuff, but there's still a the bigger issue is not addressed, and the government gets away with all the stuff it gets away with, without being held to account, or without people on the streets sort of making, making people think about what the issues are. So I wouldn't like to see us just dissolving into lots of small mutual aid groups. I think there's still a lot of room for larger actions, even if they're locally based, which will, again, move the whole movement forward.
I think now it's time to swap facilitator again, and I'm conscious that Hester and Constantine, you haven't been facilitators. Would you like to be one?
I'll volunteer to facilitate.
Good.
I wanted to acknowledge Constantine had a point. Are we swapping minute takers as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And I apologise, I think I've lost the minutes along the line as well somewhere.
I just wrote mine in the chat.
So who's the note taker now?
Yeah. I'm trying to think what VJ was saying. Yeah, it's kind of trade-off. We might get more people if we change the strategy, because XR has always been about the civil disobedience from its very beginning, and there is a kind of the limit, I guess. Only as many people can join the movement as there are kind of the will to do this kind of action, and it's not going to grow indefinitely. If we change the strategy and different type of activities, we might get new people. Question is whether this kind of activity may get us anywhere. Maybe it's better to have less people, but still carry on with this type of pretty unique, arrestable, high risk, but still very, very. It should be positive. Yeah, we need to sideline activities that frighten the people, especially like in the tube, or like you say in Oxford. What we do in Russia, it should always be positive to people, directed to the authorities, to the corporations, to the system problem, not to the people. Never. That's it.
Rosie.
I think we could grow the community by actually giving people information that they needed and wanted, and asking the community what skills or information they felt they wanted in order to, because everybody's, we could ask now what they want to retain. At the end of this, are there certain things that you want to retain now that we've seen the traffic stop, the flight stops, the air getting cleaner? Are there certain things that you want to retain? That's number one. I'm sorry if I'm carrying on. But number two, I think there's still, in this country, there's definitely, most probably, a need for civil disobedience, because governments will duck it if they possibly can. And so you need to reassure people that if they join the group, they needn't be arrested, or, that there's other things they can do to help those protests. And those protests won't always be popular. Business people aren't going to be thanking us for stopping the traffic in London, for them going to important conferences or whatever. So I think, you just need to reassure people that they don't need to be involved in, like anything as horrible as, that they fear they will be. I don't know. It's just fine. Sorry, I've done it again.
Thank you, Rosie. Does anyone have a follow follow-on thought or response or another thing to say? Or we could think for a moment. Pete, and then Konstantin.
Yeah, one action that we considered locally was just simply to collect people's visions in some way, as a poem or a picture or whatever, the vision of what they want not to go back to, or want to have more of, more bird song, less traffic, more bike lanes, but not to tell them, not to lecture them, but to listen. I think that maybe that we're in a listening, gathering, collecting phase as a way to grow. And then you go, well, this is connected with the Amazon, and this is connected with the Australian bushfires, and this is connected with animal agriculture and stuff. We know all that. We can do that once we've listened, and then we get everybody on board with the global climate issue.
I fully support that as well, Pete. Konstantin had a point.
Yeah, I think it's in about the same direction. Yeah, probably more question to you. So, what's the logic of the Trust the People program, assuming that groups or like specific activists would help local communities get engaged? Okay, assuming that we will really help the communities to get stronger. Does it mean that these communities are they expected kind of to join XR, or what is the logic? No.
I think everyone that's involved has got different hopes, but I share some of the hopes with the people I'm working with, that many are disengaged and have always been disengaged, or apolitical, have no trust in government, local or national, and who feel their voice will never be heard, never has been heard, never will be heard, kind of thing. And also a lot of immigrant families, even if they're sort of second or third generation immigrants, their families will have tried to keep their heads down, just work hard, pay the bills, put food on the table, don't rock the boat. That's the kind of. I'm gonna have to pause. My baby's crying.
Who can facilitate?
Konstantin, would you like to facilitate, as you haven't so far?
I'm fine. Yeah. Any more ideas, thoughts, reflection?
I think the aim of growing the community is so that people treat us kindly, support us in theory, even if they don't in practice, so that when they hear about the tube trains, they will come and say to you, what a stupid thing, and then you can say how it happened. You've got people that maybe think kindly about your actions because they've been in, even if they've attended one of the Extinction Rebellion opening talks, they will know that it's pretty desperate. And so just hearing, you want people to think well of us as a group, and rather than there goes those lunatics again, sort of thing.
Okay. Anybody else? Hesta, you're back. Technical point, Vijay.
Does someone want to take over the note taking? Who hasn't done it before?
Has everyone done it now? I'm just trying to hold on to my baby. He's standing in the windowsill right now.
Oh dear. Okay. Oh God, it looks really dangerous.
Window is closed. But
Thank God for that. I was thinking we might be in a Michael Jackson situation.
his favourite thing.
I'll take notes if there's any more things that people have to say.
Yeah, I'm trying to finish answering Konstantin's question. No, it's not XR branded. It is for. It's alongside the strategy of mass mobilization. Listening is the key thing, so it's nice to hear Pete saying that as well. Sharing stories. So one of the jobs in the project is being a story harvester, looking for examples where, like Frome. Does anyone know that town? That small town? Is it Sussex? Do you live there, Vijay?
No, I know. I've got friends who live there.
All right. Okay.
I know the town.
So they just kind of completely changed their local government. It's like they also use other places globally as examples. They use Northern Rojava as an example of somewhere that's self-governed, and I mean it's very sad because actually Turkey have just bombed the hell out of Rojava now. So they were like, it was peace in the Middle East was Kurdistan, Rojava, but so that's quite an emotional subject for me. Also, my sister was a volunteer and didn't come back. So, but they do try to use other examples around the world where there's been participatory democracy and it works, and so it's supposed to also inspire people and educate people that they are not insignificant, they are not too small to be heard, they are important, and we are the masses. And we just haven't grown up with that message. So it's trying to tap into that. That we have to be listened to because we are the masses, the power. But if we're not representing everyone, then we're not the masses. And if people can't recognise themselves when they look, then we're not doing the right job.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Vijay. Unmute, please.
I'm just thinking of this as the key points. I know where. Are we moving towards the key point part of the discussion? I don't know. Or we're still. Because I can sort of agree with what's been said, but it's like, what are the 2 points we want to bring forward? I think I'm hearing that actually we're in a process of collecting stories, local ideas, local people's concerns, and listening and gathering rather than, and then any proactivity comes out of that listening process. Is that what I'm? Does that make sense?
Hester?
Yeah, I think you're getting there. I just forgot something really good that came up when we did the webinar yesterday. It was about not coming across as though we know better. And so I like what Rosie's saying about asking the community, what information do you not have, and how would what information would you like? Now, how can we provide that to you so that you're informed? And that's leading the way into the neighbourhood assembly, isn't it? Give the information and let the people decide.
Yeah. I think we need to.
I'll just ask for some guidance as current note taker to capture the last 2 points. If what should I write? Would humility be a fair thing to write? that we're receiving wisdom, not spouting it.
Not preaching.
Yeah.
2 points. Let's have a think for a minute each. And look back at what we've already written.
I haven't put mine in yet. My one was bringing knowledge to the local community and organising people to address local issues. Those are the points that were given him whilst VJ was facilitating first off. I think it sort of boiled down to I think what Histus was saying about making people feel powerful, making people feel that they can actually make a difference. Because I think that's one of the basis of it all. Because people can just feel, I've had so many people saying, what's the point of us acting nationally when America and China are just producing so much rubbish? And so,
Quentin has a technical point.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, Rosie. I think we need to select someone who will check the temperature on all the suggestions and select the 2. And we need to select the note taker who presents the 2 points to the big group.
Okay. All right.
Another technical in the chat, Rosie. A lot of the minutes are now in the chat. So, like some of the points you've made. Don't know if you can see that. If you go up from 7:56 up to now.
So, who's going to facilitate the temperature check? Pete, maybe you?
I'm note taking.
I can have a go. Okay. So, temperature check. This is for agreement. This is not sure. This is no, thank you.
Okay.
Can you just tell me the question? How to engage better?
How we grow.
How do we grow the movement?
How do we grow? Okay.
The community, and we've got to come up with 2.
Yeah. So, how do we grow the movement? Point 1. Address local concerns rather than the climate emergency as the. So, local concerns. Listen to the experiences of difficulty that people are having with for example, Constantine gave dams construction. So listening to local issues. It's the same point, isn't it?
Yeah. So listening to local issues.
Listening to local issues. Okay.
That's just me, but.
Yeah. All right. So that's the set. We have about 3 points the same. Yes, Vijay.
Sorry, just listening to local issues to me it's not specific enough, because we're talking about growing the XR community. We're not just talking about growing communities, and I think it needs to be related to climate emergency. So it needs to be local issues related to either ecological or climate issues.
Constantine has a correct point.
Yeah, good point. It's not only listening, it's helping them, basically sharing XI experience. So we set up this school for civil protest, and XI is a partner. Basically, we provide the trainings and seminar in the same way, basically engaging with the communities and getting them on board. It will take time, but it's kind of a strategy.
And to add that, it develops a trust between XR and wherever they are in the world. So assisting with local issues, we kind of support this. Not to say there's not more work to do as well as that. All right, all of these come under the same point, I think. We've got mutual aid groups, we've got listening. I'm trying to look in the notes for something other than what we just said. Not doing a very good a job at this.
It's fine, it could be just one point. It's no problem.
Sharing, is this another point? So, sharing stories, visions and aspirations.
It's a bit vague, isn't it, really? Unless it's...
yeah.
I think underlying there's got to be a way that people feel their voices are heard. Maybe that's part of the first one. You know.
So, how about engaging with local issues to ensure everyone feels heard? BJ.
Well, that it'll make a difference. Sorry, BJ's saying something.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that maybe there are 2 points. One of which is engaging with the local issues which have an impact on the ecological and climate emergency. I'm thinking of the HS2 protest camps because they're very much a local issue, local woodland being destroyed, etc. But it's also directly related to the wider ecological emergency.
Biodiversity loss.
So, and whether it's a cement plant being built on sort of virgin woodland or whatever it might be in whatever country it is, I think those issues are important for XR to be actively involved. The second point is the more it's in ways the more receptive sort of side which we've talked about, which is listening to people's concerns and actually finding what might be other issues which we want to bring into the XR sort of family, if you like, in the medium term. So I think those are sort of 2 separate points, really, rather than 1 point. That's all.
1 minute left. So how do we feel? Our first point is...
Oh, she's gone.
Yeah.
Oh, she's gone. She's disappeared. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh
Rosie, up to you.
We're going to return to the main session in 30 seconds.
We're not engaged in actually answering this question. We're engaged in practicing the process, and I think we did really well.
I think we did well. I thought everybody was really, really good.
Yeah.
So Pete, are you going to present the 2 points, probably consulting with Hester?
I'll have a go.
Pete, go for Pete, you.
Everyone, welcome back.
We made it back.
Esther before the end of our session. She just was whipped away from us.
Oh no, okay, but we all reunited. Great. Okay, so we now kind of just summarize of how in the People's Assembly, after the deliberation phase, you would then kind of move into the output phase and kind of collect the feedback of the discussion group. So as a People's Assembly facilitator or the main facilitator, you would then invite the note takers from each discussion group to come to the front and then ask them to feedback the 2 or 3 points, really concise, like really ask them to keep it to a sentence. So the points can be taken down really clearly. So Tim volunteered to be our assembly note taker, and can I hear back from one group what are the 2 points on the question of how do we grow the XR community? So you probably all took notes, but anyone who's volunteering to feed the points back. Jessie.
Should I do that now?
Yeah, please. So 2 points in a really kind of concise 2 sentences of feedback.
We didn't have 2, I'm afraid. It was 3 because we couldn't decide. Hope that's all right.
Okay.
So that was support marginalised communities.
Yeah. Hang on. Let's give Tim time.
Oh, sorry.
Let's give Tim time to take down the notes. Also, that's a real point. As a facilitator, you can invite people in to give hand signal if they agree with the points which get fed back.
Oh yes, please.
So we get a sense of the whole group where we're at. So to support marginalized groups, is that
support marginalized communities?
Okay.
Refocus on XR's 3 demands.
Mm-hmm.
And to ask 3 people to join XR, for example, by inviting them to the Heading for Extinction talk.
Mm-hmm.
So that last one was specifically because the question involved the word we. So it's like, what can we personally do? That was our interpretation.
Great, thank you. So I'm just wondering if yeah, perfect. So Tim now took down the feedback points in the chat. Great. Group number 2. I saw Hester's finger up.
I invite my group to agree or disagree because as we were affirming them, I leapt out of the room.
Great. Go ahead.
So, point 1 is to spend time listening. My group? Do I get affirmation? Rosie's not agreeing.
To what?
Our communities, that we listen to our local community, in our very close neighbourhood, to whatever they have to tell us that they're concerned about. Okay.
Okay.
I'm trying to be concise, Rosie. I'm trying to be concise. And 2 was to take action on local concerns or local fights. For example, HS2. Other examples where XR have already done it is the Bradley open face coal extraction site.
Mm-hmm.
And there are
take actions. Just keep it concise so Tim can take the notes. So 2, take actions on local
fights, concerns.
Mm-hmm. Concerns. Mm-hmm.
Does my group affirm this? Konstantin has a point.
Yeah, we did discuss
just kind of not to go into a discussion. Just if there's something really direct, Konstantin.
No.
So this is just a modeling because I want us to move on to the actual feedback. And one last point, maybe Konstantin, do you want to give us the last point?
Okay, not engaged in local protests, but help the group, like back office with technologies, with our knowledge that you have in XR, like how to plan a good action, basically, how to self-organize.
Is that point number 3? Confusion.
It's a mix between number 2 and number 3.
Good. We have the little annex for point number 2. Good. And Tim, you managed to take these down in the chat. Great. Good. Okay, so now something that is kind of more specific to this training call now is just to hear back from you is kind of what was good facilitation? What did you experience as good facilitation? Yeah, Tricia?
When Roz noticed that Claire didn't speak very much, so she encouraged her to do so.
Great. Other points of good facilitation? EJ?
Yeah, one of the people in our subgroup dropped off because he was having communication issues, and the facilitator at that time was concerned of trying to find ways of getting them back into contact.
Direct point for Hester?
Welcome back, Moses.
Nice. Claire, you had a point of good facilitation. Anything that you want to share?
Sorry, I didn't unmute easily. When I had a particularly sort of big gaps when people weren't really coming up with anything new, because I was one of the later ones, I noticed there was quite a difference between the way I handled it, which was not very well, and the way James did. He kind of just got us all back and drew things together and then got us talking again, which was particularly good, I thought.
What can you say a bit more? Drew things together in which sense, or?
And what we'd already been talking about, and managed to get us to sort of say more.
Good. Peter. Pete.
Yeah, I think Hester's a natural, and she was really good at when things were starting, lots of voices coming in with a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of the other. Hester was really good at summarizing without directing and offering, have I heard it right? I mean, she didn't use those words, but it was very good at checking in that we were capturing the essence, and that was really good.
Great, thank you. So, were there anything that you've learned that you think could have been done better? Anything that you've experimented in the group, and you think, actually, that could have been done better? And just opening the mic to the people who've kind of shared a bit less, specifically. Or any challenges you experienced? Konstantin.
Timekeeping. Yeah. Could have been better. Yeah, we didn't have timekeeping. Yeah, finally we didn't have time to feedback about the facilitation. We were still kind of dragging on with the question.
Yeah, that's good. And also just to be aware that the exercise is extremely we keep it really short. It might be quite confusing in the facilitation. Also the consolidation of 5 minutes, as you experienced, is not enough time. So, but it's a good one. It's a really important one to always be aware of when you're facilitating. Great. Any other points of which could have been done better? Is that a hand up?
It wasn't. It was more not could have been done better. It was just a worry if you don't have such nice people. That was my concern. Is like how you manage it and manage yourself when people are confrontational. It wasn't. We were fine, but that was just a point that came to my head.
So how could that been dealt if people are a bit more confrontational? Hester, do you want to have a kind of direct response to that? Yeah.
I think it's covered in the pillars. The radical inclusivity, I think, says something like, we welcome all people, but not all behaviours. And there's more about what that means and those behaviours. So I think if I facilitated and that was being contravened, I would just remind and say, so guys, we've got this pillar we need to follow, it's this. And the behaviour isn't quite in line with that. So I would try, I think, hopefully I'd be able to do it and not take it personally and just stay slightly detached. Not detached, but you know what I mean, like make it technical rather than personal.
Great. Nikki, your side of the point.
Well, when we did the training before, we did role plays. We acted horrible people. Oh, no, I'm not allowed to say horrible people. Horrible behaviours, and it was a lot of fun. So I recommend that so that you get some muscles built up in dealing with that sort of situation.
And I guess also, if there's it can happen that it starts to become a discussion between two people during the deliberation phase, and as a facilitator it's really good then to just break up and just name. I noticed that we kind of it seems to be a discussion happening between two people here, and let's open it up again to the whole group, and let's bring the focus back to the question is this and this. So how do we grow the XR community, or whatever your question is? And let's take a moment just to have a breather, because I feel like it's a bit of a heated discussion at the moment. And just by naming what you observe kind of takes a bit the steam and kind of grounds it. Great. Is there another feedback on kind of facilitation which could have been done better before we move on? And I'm just aware of some people might not have shared that much. Maybe you want to share some of your experience. Sure.
It was mentioned before here. For example, when suddenly the group is kind of quiet, then how can you? Is there a kind of a method to bring them back to discussion? But be quiet for a while is good.
It's also okay. I think especially when you facilitate, you can get really nervous when there's silence. But it's actually okay. It's like maybe as facilitator, you might want to repeat the question again and acknowledge that you already heard some really good points. And just, if you're calm as facilitator, then also the people feel calmer. Vicky.
Yeah, I was going to say the summarised question and what we've covered so far, you might complement the ideas which have been achieved already, and that during that time people might then feel there's a boost to move on. But as you say, silence is golden.
Great. Okay. So if these are all the feedback points, then I'll hand over to Vicky.
Thank you. So we're coming to the end, and we're going to move on to what happens next in a minute. But I was wondering if there's any outstanding questions, and also whether we met some of the goals, people's aims at the beginning. I mean, I was very impressed about how Hester seemed to have managed to deal with difficult behaviours in your examples really well. And I wondered whether I know that Rosie wanted to know whether there was a difference between chairing and facilitating, whether that was answered, whether we made progress with dealing with difficult people, and whether we discovered new tools for working groups and assemblies, and whether anyone Constantine got ideas, and Joe also, on how to train people. So were those goals met at all, do you think? Gaz?
Yeah, sorry. What is the difference between chairing and facilitating?
Well, does anyone else want to comment on what we've achieved? And does anybody else want to answer that? I mean, I'm happy to, but I thought we'd better look. Did we make progress on dealing with difficult behaviours? Yeah, okay, some progress, that's good. And in terms of chairing and facilitating, as I see it, is you're actively encouraging people to participate. A chair is a role in an older a 19th century structure where you are the person who steps back and allows the discussion to happen. Very often disagreements are happening and you'll just keep things in focus, keep people speaking in turn, and you might arbitrate, but you're not actively encouraging people to find an agreement. So there's overlap, of course. Rosie?
I think I found that difficult because I was sort of conscious that there were people who weren't speaking. If I'd been chairing the meeting, I'd have said to somebody, well, you haven't said anything, or, like, would you like to say something? But I felt as a facilitator that you don't want to put someone on the spot.
There's gentle ways to do that. You can leave the door open for them to speak, or you can say, what do you think about this particular point? Petra might have a better answer as to that.
Yeah, I think, there are different voices. I personally think, people also can contribute in a way just being present in a people's assembly and not necessarily verbally contributing something. But also I think it's important to make explicit, to open the mic to people who haven't shared yet, and to actually hold the space as a facilitator, maybe a moment of silence, so people who might not be as confident speakers are not choosing, or like I feel whatever, holding back more, to step in. But also I think it's okay if people don't want to speak, and I think it's important not to force anyone. Pete, you had a point to that?
It's a question. I have seen people who have helped facilitate people's assemblies with a script kind of on their phone or written that is available somewhere, and they've gone through the script. Do we have any resources like that you can send out or link us to? If there's a place where it can be linked to, can you put it in the chat, please?
Absolutely. Joe, in a moment, Joe will say something about kind of what is next.
Thank you.
So, Vijay.
Hello. Yeah. Question. I appreciate the whole principle of the 3 pillars, which I don't think I've come across those before, but not in quite so set out like that. But my question is, how, if you had a larger group of people in a people's assembly, I think it's quite crucial that those points, the 3 pillars, get across to people, especially people who aren't familiar with the people's assembly process. And I'm sort of conscious, having been in sort of those group discussions, that those sort of principles can. They can sort of be not quite glazed over, but they're just sort of said as a bit of an intro, rather than getting people to fully take them on board, which I think is quite important. So I'm just wondering whether there's people got experience of how to do that, or it's maybe quite a big question, but I think it's all to do with actually trying to get the culture of the 3 pillars into people's mindset as they're going into discussions, whether they need to be recapped at the beginning of the breakout group.
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump in and answer the question. So in the beginning, it's really important that you're building the container. So people actually, that it is part of being radically inclusive. It means like people who have no idea about active listening or never been on a people's assembly, that you explain the container, you explain how it works, you talk about the pillars, you read the radical inclusivity statement, and also, so what we've been doing with the online people's assemblies is that we have a little exercise, the active listening exercise, because it's a lot of people are not familiar with it, and it's such an important part of the people's assembly. So we actually, with each people's assembly, in the beginning, we have an active listening exercise, which is also really beautiful because it brings people present and it builds connection and somehow a little bit of trust. So definitely in a people's assembly, you would definitely go and go through the different stages and explain also how it works. Yeah.
Any other feedback on the process, on the training? No, okay.
Катя,
Cheshire.
видела бы ты себе.
It's not really on the process, but I just wanted to thank you for using the question that you did for the actual content, because I felt like what came out of it is something that we're all sort of really thinking about and questioning at the moment. And I'll probably feed back to my local group with some of our thoughts, because I just thought they were that valuable. So yeah, thank you.
Great.
That's great. Yeah, and obviously that's something that we didn't actually model properly in terms of where do these points get fed back to. And in this case, we will not feed these points back to any further kind of group. But of course, invitation is for you as a group, discussion group, if there's some interesting points, it's really good if you want to bring them forward into other groups. Great.
Okay, so shall I pass on? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Hester.
Do we have permission to save the chat if we want to keep our own minutes?
Can we show a hand signal if we agree?
Thank you. And
okay. And Cheshire, and then we're going to move to Joe to say what's next.
Sorry, I had one more pressing question, which was the process of the assembly. Because we had an assembly in Brighton in January and no one knows what actually happened to all of that effort that went into it. So I just wanted a bit of feedback on how we can make sure that our assembly that we hold is actually heard.
Is that citizens or people's?
People's. But yeah, people's.
I find the what happens to the results is a really important part, and it's where things often fall down because all the effort goes into the process and not enough into what happens afterwards. But maybe Petra's response to that. I think it's a very important area which needs more attention. You actually need somebody dedicated to taking the results on to where they're meant to go, whether that's feeding it back to all the participants or to the local authority or to actions, whatever it is. Somebody needs a role in doing that piece of work. Petra, do you want to? Does anybody else want to?
I mean, to be honest with you, I could make up something, but I think it's a really very valid and very important point, and it feeds back to the question of how do we build trust. And to be honest with you, the people's assemblies that I've been part of, we just fed them back to the groups, and we left it there. And in some way, I feel it's quite neglected. So thank you for that food for thought. That's all I can say.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. So, do you think we should now move to Joe into next steps to honour the timetable that we've got?
Brilliant. So, I'm part of the People's Assembly Circle in the UK, and so to some extent we can support you in helping you if you want to become involved in people's assemblies, if you want to find assemblies in which you can participate or facilitate, and try to help you there. So I'm going to send you an email, and the email contains, first of all, the scripts and quite importantly the manual, the People's Assembly manual, and that breaks down a few things quite nicely. And there's also lots of different groups you can join if you're interested in democracy and stuff. But a good one for communications is, in terms of people's assemblies and facilitating people's assemblies, is to join the Telegram pool. So when you get the email, there's some groups which you can join optionally depending on your interest, and there's others which are more core if you want to facilitate people's assemblies. And of course, importantly, if you get stuck or want us to support you, I'm going to include the email address. So that just helps. So are there any questions about that? Any questions about what you want to do next and how we can help you? Yes, so Petra, and God's first.
It was just Hester said about shadowing. Is there an opportunity to do that before we get in the deep end?
But I would say to that one, tomorrow we're going to have an online people's assembly. Just come, facilitate, get experience, that's how you learn. I mean, you can just sit into lots of people's assemblies, but hey, you now have the toolbox, now you need to practice to use it.
Okay, Petra, okay.
Yeah. What I'd suggest is you pick a little piece of it and say, I'll do that bit, and maybe then if you're feeling brave, you do another piece at the end, so you have a little slot. Do you think that would be okay? And then the next one you feel more confident, do more, because we were just building up confidence. This is my second, Tim's first.
So how do we do that? Do we just agree to it and then have a chat afterwards? Is that how it works?
Petra.
So with the People's Assembly that we hold, there's a chance that as a new facilitator you can zoom in a bit earlier, and if there are any questions that came up for you, there's a chance we have like a 10-15 minute window where you can ask questions or clarify anything. And then we walk through, in the People's Assembly, we walk through the container again, so you get reminded again, and then there's a chance for you to facilitate. And I think, it's a great way to just start to gain more skills and experience and get more kind of trust into your own abilities. Vicky?
Well, I'm doing another one on the 11th of May with only one other person, and I'd have to ask her, but maybe that's an opportunity for you to have a little slot. It'd be great if you could.
Yeah. Great. Maybe
we need to get
information with Joel.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, brilliant. So working as a team, because you can have the script and you can divide bits up between you, so it makes it a lot easier. And I've put a link in for what we're doing tomorrow, and it really is, if you become a facilitate, it's not anything official. The information, we could decide to send the information somewhere to a group, but it's a great chance. I'm going there to do some facilitation, and what I'm going to do is just make a lot of mistakes, and that's my opportunity to do that. The link's there, and you can come and join if you want. And then the email contains a lot of other stuff. So what's next? Closing, I guess.
Yes, Tim.
Okay, thanks. Massive thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. That's our 3 hours. The way we're going to check out this evening is a new one for me, actually, but it sounds like fun. So we're going to just take a moment to reflect on this training experience, think about something that we're grateful for from this, or a way that it's perhaps left us feeling. And Joe's going to unmute all of us, and on the count of 3 we're all going to just say at the same time that reflection. So I'll just give you a few seconds to think about what you might like to say. And then Joe's going to unmute us all. And then we'll do it on 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hester, for coming with your child. Being a mum as well, that was so nice.
So lovely for you all.
Very good evening.
Oh,
tired now.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant.
I'll see some of you tomorrow. Bye.
Brilliant.
Good to see you, Hester.
Oh, good to see you. Great to see you, Petra. I lost
Yes, really. Beautiful to see you. And your little one. Hello.
Can I share that link for tomorrow's People's Assembly with my group?
Absolutely.